You're in the waterloop.
Waterloop.
Waterloop episode number 124, an atlas for local solutions. Local government staff responsible for water management often have limited resources and must avoid risk, putting them on the constant search for proven solutions that work for their peers. Enter the Atlas, an online community for local government leaders to browse case studies, follow topics, and crowdsource ideas and advice, as discussed in this episode with Ellory Monks, co-founder of the Atlas. Ellory explains that water content has always been extremely popular on the platform, and that lead, green infrastructure, data and technology, and sea level rise are leading categories of case studies. Before starting the conversation, I want to mention that Waterloop is a nonprofit media outlet that depends on your interest and in our funders and sponsors. Waterloop is made possible in part by grants from the Walton Family Foundation and Spring Point Partners. Waterloop is also supported through sponsorships by Hydroloop and High Sierra Showerheads. I'm going to briefly talk about these companies that are advancing water sustainability and then start the podcast. Thank you for listening.
Waterloop.
The Consumer Electronics Show is the largest and most influential technology event in the world. In 2020, water stole the show. That's when an in-home water recycling system called Hydroloop debuted. Hydroloop takes the water from showers and washing machines and then cleans it so it can be used again. Hydroloop was awarded Best of Innovation in the category for sustainability, eco-design, and smart energy, and also won Best Startup, Best Sustainable Product, and the overall award for Best of the Best, beating more than 4,000 competitors. Water tech is hot thanks to Hydroloop. With Hydroloop, you can use water twice. Learn more at hydroloop.com.
Waterloop.
If you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me talk about High Sierra Showerheads. I am such a big fan of them for their water efficiency, for the powerful spray they provide, their solid metal construction, no plastic parts involved, and how they're made in the USA. But there are some other great recommendations on High Sierra Showerheads. Let me share these with you. They are named Best Showerhead by Popular Science. They are named Best Showerhead by CNET. High Sierra Showerheads also gets named Best Low Flow Showerhead by Wirecutter, Tree Hugger, and CNN Underscored. You can also look on Amazon and see that they get tons of high-star reviews from all the satisfied customers. You can get 20% off using promo code LOOP20 at highsierrashowerheads.com.
You're in the waterloop.
Welcome to Waterloop. This is Travis. Going to talk about the Atlas today. This is a tremendous tool for local governments. I am joined by its co-founder and Ellory Monks. She is also the executive vice president of GovExec. Ellory, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Travis.
All right. This is going to be a fun one. We have some history back in D.C. working under the Obama administration on environmental issues. I was over at EPA as the comms director for the Office of Water, and you were...
I was a fellow with the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House.
Yeah, and that kind of will lead into the origin story of the Atlas. Before we go down that road, could you tell folks what the Atlas is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Atlas is a free online community for local government officials and staff to do three things. The first is to browse case studies. The second is to follow trending topics in local government. And the third is to post questions to one another to crowdsource ideas and advice. We have about 3,000 local government leaders that are using the Atlas each month. The thing that we're most known for and the thing that they're utilizing the most is that case study database of best practices and the corresponding following topics functionality, which we can talk about if it's helpful.
I think we will, and we'll pull out the water connections because you have a
Yes.
lot of them in there, which is really awesome, and why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were in DC, you were working in kind of this environmental space. There's lots of stuff going on. It was a great time to be working on environmental issues. Lots got done. How did you get the idea for this? What's your origin story? What's the problem you identified?
So, as you mentioned, I was in DC, as was my co-founder, Elle. So I was a fellow with OSTP, and Elle was at EPA with you, Travis.
That's right.
And kind of completely independently of each other, we joined the administration, right? We were working in DC thinking that the federal government was the answer to all of the world's most gnarly problems. Climate, we were young.
Yeah.
Climate, affordability, equity, all the things that we care, that we care so much about. And we thought, the federal government was going to be really the right way to do that. And working in DC, kind of by fate, we started working on federal initiatives that worked with local governments. So I worked extensively on the Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force, which was working with a lot of local governments in New York and New Jersey. And in that work, realized local is where it's at. That's where the real action is. You're closer to people. And so you're closer to the problem, which means that you're closer to the solutions. Things happened a lot more quickly, and again, the action was just a lot more tangible. So this is all very fateful because we were kind of doing this independently at the same time. We left DC along with another one of our co-founders who was also in the administration, and very quickly won a $3 million grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to work with 8 U.S. cities to pursue basically innovative infrastructure. So whether that was in financing mechanisms, the actual technology itself, whatever that may be. And going into that work, we thought, okay, the big barriers are going to be finance and procurement. Like, people aren't going to know how to actually pay for this, or they're not going to know how to buy it. And those were big pain points for sure. But we encountered a much more human barrier, which was that local government leaders are very rightfully and very understandably risk adverse, right? They all want to do the best thing for their community, and they all want to be innovative, but nobody wants to be first. And there are really good reasons behind that, which we can talk about. And so in order to equip any of these local governments to do anything differently when it came to infrastructure, including water infrastructure, we needed to very clearly be able to arm them with who's done this before, what other local governments, what did it look like, what was the cost, what vendors were involved. And ideally, that local government leader would get on the phone with the point of contact in the other local government before they even thought about bringing it up to their mayor or to council or to their city manager. And that's how the Atlas was born. So it started off as a Google spreadsheet of innovative infrastructure projects that I managed. And as it's evolved and as it's grown, it's turned into this really dynamic online community around the case study database.
Yeah, I love a lot of the things you said there. The idea that local government is where you actually see results because you're so close, you're on the ground, and you can see the impacts of your work rather than kind of those big, huge federal government programs that then pass things on down, and so that's great to be able to empower all these local government people across the country. I want to talk about water and what place / popularity water has held in the Atlas. Where was it in the beginning? How has it kind of trended over time as far as its place in this?
So our Our roots are in water. When we initially started the Atlas, we had, I would say, the most granularity in terms of the topics that were included were in water, and the most case study content that we had was in water. And I think that trend has remained true over time. I think the reason for that, and I don't want to play favorites, but I think the reason for that is because if local government is where the action is at, right, when compared to state and federal, I would argue that water is where the action is at when compared to many other types of infrastructure. And there are reasons for that, which I know you guys discuss extensively in this podcast. But right, some of the reasons for that are that our water systems are overwhelmingly old.
Yes.
and reaching the end of their useful lifetimes. And so there's a lot of action, right? Things need to be replaced, things need to be upgraded. There's, because of water rates, there tends to be money there. There's all kinds of good reasons for that. And so I think water and all of the water related subtopics, right? It's a big topic, but they have always been extremely popular on the Atlas. And that's, I think, held constant over time.
I'm curious, the people that are using the Atlas, you say local government, but could you expand on that a little bit and talk about who these people are? You said there's like 3,000 people using it a month. Who are these folks?
Yeah. So our goal, I know this is a water podcast, but our goal is to create a big tent online community for local government leaders. So that's all employees, right? Anybody who works for a local government, that's a municipality, a county, a water utility, an airport authority, whatever that may be, right? And we verify all of this. So it actually has to be legit. Anyways, so it's folks who work for a local government. The vast majority of folks using the Atlas each month are from North America. The overwhelming majority are from municipalities and water utilities, though we do, as we are growing, we do have a lot more representation from counties and states as well. But a big percentage are municipalities and water utilities. And then in terms of who it actually is, again, the whole point is to bring everybody into this one big tent, because one of our big convictions, right, is that the real magic happens in local government when you're breaking down silos between traditional sectors and between traditional departments, so that you have public works interacting with IT, that's interacting with sustainability, that's interacting with the mayor's office, and that's where the real magic happens. So you see a lot of city managers, a lot of public works directors and division directors of whether it's like the stormwater division or water quality or whatever that may be. There are a lot of those folks on there as kind of like our most core community members. And then we have a big contingent in addition to that of IT leaders, whether that's actual IT or whether it's innovation or it's like chief information officers, CDOs, those types of folks as well.
Yeah, gotcha. Cool. I'm curious about the issues that are of most interest to them. You talk about case studies. Obviously, water is a big umbrella. There's lots of different pieces under that. What are the water issues of most interest to the users of Atlas?
So I would say there's probably 4. And I actually, right before we recorded this, I looked at the trend data.
All right.
I thought that you might ask.
Being prepared. Good job.
I think you might ask about that. So there are basically 4 that rank really, really high. Okay. The 4 are green infrastructure and stormwater. lead and lead service line replacement. I would say data and tech broadly, there are a lot of things that kind of fall under that. That's like a big bucket one, which we can talk about if you want to. And then the fourth big one is sea level rise and climate.
Wow, I'm pretty surprised to hear that. I mean, that is tremendous insight to hear, the data that people are going for based on what the topics they're going for, right? This isn't like water people sitting around trying to guess, oh, I bet they're most interested in this or that.
What would you have guessed? I'm curious. Which one surprises you?
Sea level rise surprises me. That's actually kind of in that very top tier of things that local government people are looking at.
Well, I will tell you some of that. So the sea level rise data is that some of our most case studies are sea level rise case studies.
Interesting. Okay, so there's a little bit of there's a lot of it out there, so that kind of brings that up. But still,
there's a little nuance there.
But you've talked about how those case studies are submitted by local government people. So that means there's a lot of that type of work happening out there, and they want to be sharing it. So there's still some popularity there for sure.
Exactly.
I guess lead doesn't surprise me too much. That's a huge, hot issue, and people are trying to make headway on that.
Well, and there's been, I mean, you know this better than I do, but with all of the rulemaking too, with LCR and stuff like that, they have a huge federal mandate to do it. So I think there's a lot of, that's a confluence of public interest, right? And residents demanding things, combined with federal mandates, which is that's the sweet spot of where people actually do something.
Yeah. Stormwater and green infrastructure doesn't surprise me as much because drinking water, wastewater, there's a lot of information out there. A lot of that stuff is pretty prescribed, if you will, whereas stormwater is of the three areas, that's one of the least funded. And where local governments are trying to have to kind of come up with solutions and figure out how to do it. And green infrastructure is a way that can be tackled.
Well, and especially some of this also gets back to our roots, which is some of that is in infrastructure finance, right? Is in terms of how do you pay for this stuff? And so we have a bunch of case studies about how you actually pay for stormwater upgrades and green infrastructure. And those are wildly popular because I think, to your point, even if a local government can get the initial cost funded, there's huge O&M questions for stormwater and for green infrastructure over time. And I think it's an area that's very ripe for the sharing of best practices about how to actually do it.
Sure. And what was the fourth category you mentioned? Some short-term memory.
Data
and
tech. And that's a catch-all, but it's if you combine several different types of data and tech, it's the most popular.
I guess I'm not as surprised by that either, because those are some of the most popular episodes of this podcast, is talking about kind of some of the solutions and the tools that are out there when it comes to managing data, using it more efficiently. Hey, what's the newest kind of tech out there you can tap into and all that. So looking back on it, maybe it's only the sea level rise one that really surprises me as much. But cool.
Well, and sea level rise, that also goes, I looked at all-time data. I looked at it from the beginning of 2020, basically. Okay. So I think sea level rise is a popular one in totality. I think it ebbs and flows based on current events.
Sure.
You'll see huge spikes, depending on what's happening, we'll see a huge spike in wildfire searches.
Sure.
Or cybersecurity, like water and cybersecurity, depending on what's happening. So it depends on how granular you want to look at the data, monthly, quarterly, yearly, et cetera.
All right. So you went into the system and you kind of pulled that data, got a snapshot that way, got that list, but you also talked to a lot of people, in real life, not just that tech computer thing. But so how does that list?
That's my actual job.
How does that list match up with what you hear in conversations with local government people? Are those some of the top things? Are there others that pop up as their key issues of interest?
So I think the ones that pop up in conversations that are not as well reflected in the data are workforce development, which I am hearing a ton about, specifically in regards to water infrastructure. And I think the other one is like federal funding broadly, like
How to get it? How to tap into
yeah,
it?
like how to get it? What can I spend it on? How quickly am I going to have to spend it? What types of strings are going to be attached to this? How are other local governments spending it? That kind of thing. I would say those are the two that are not as well reflected in the data. We see it, but not in the same way.
Interesting. And then you have these conversations with real people, and that helps to inform the direction of the atlas, or like, hey, maybe we need to kind of look for more in this area or that area, or obviously functionality is part of it, but the actual content itself, huh?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a city advisory team, and their whole role is to mostly advise me and our engineering team about how the platform should look and function and what types of features we should be building. There are some very awesome water leaders on that city advisory team, including Kathy Bailey, who has, I know you guys know, and you've probably talked to her a bunch. And they've been instrumental.
Cincinnati, there, the head of their drinking water program there in Cincinnati.
Yep. Same. Have you talked to Reese Johnson? He's also in Cincinnati. He's the head of their. It's not their drinking water. He's in charge of stormwater.
Okay.
It's separate in Cincinnati, which I forget what it's actually called. But anyways, so they help advise on what we should actually build, how the site should function and be featured. They also, I'm in regular communication with them, and they tell us what types of topics are top of mind for them, and all of those kinds of things. The way that we determine what type of additional case studies we should be trying to publish and those sorts of things is actually a little more data-driven, which is that I was just referencing the data. We track, right, how people are searching and the challenge categories they're using and all of that kind of stuff. And when we start to see trending searches where we don't have really good case studies, we'll then as a team say, okay, we want to work with these cities or these local governments to get some of these best practices up, because we see it in the search trends that people are interested in reading this type of case study. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's informed by conversations, but also by data, which is good. That's the right call.
Absolutely. So I wondered if you could kind of share a few of the most popular water case studies,
Yes.
and maybe explain that process of how these case studies come about, and then what are some of the most popular ones for water?
So all of the case studies are published. They're published by our members. So they could be published by a local government itself. A lot of our case studies are published by nonprofits. So we have nonprofit partnerships with the Water Now Alliance, which you probably know, as well as the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange. Both water related, both have published fabulous case studies into the database. And then the third category is we also have case studies that are published by companies, by private sector companies. All of the case studies have the same format, all that kind of good stuff, so that they're easy to search and then figure out which one is actually relevant. So you're not wasting your time.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a lot easier than skimming through white papers. They're on 18 million websites. Yeah, it's brutal. Anyways.
Any idea how many water case studies you have on there? I'm putting you on the spot here.
I mean, several hundred.
Okay.
I can't.
I don't need a precise. I don't need a precise number.
I would say probably like 400,
Okay.
500, 4 or
Yeah.
500. It's a lot. It's a
Awesome.
lot.
Yeah, sure.
So you asked about
The most popular ones.
popular case studies. So let me harken back, and I'm actually looking through. I'm looking through the database while we do this.
This is in real time right now,
Yeah,
people.
it's real time.
We are
It's
working.
real time, everybody.
Yeah.
So the categories that we talked about. So I'll just go through the list. So for lead, the most popular case study in lead is City of Cincinnati, by far. Kathy Bailey's work. I think their Get the Lead Out program has actually been first of all very successful, and it's had a very unique focus on equity, which I think many local governments are interested in replicating, because I think they've had a big awakening about how important equity issues are in water. So that's, I think, far and away the most popular. There are also some really popular case studies related to lead surface line replacement in Loveland, Colorado, and Indianapolis. There are also some pretty popular ones in that category too. In data and tech, there's a case study out of Orlando that's really popular, that's about using like real-time monitoring, like sensors and real-time monitoring for flood prevention. But there are also some really popular ones relating to like backflow prevention, tech-enabled maintenance, and monitoring, and those kinds of things as well. There are some other really popular ones too. In green infrastructure, far and away the most popular case study recently, like in the last 6 months, related to stormwater and green infrastructure, is actually out of Vancouver. And it's the title is Green Infrastructure Acts as a Bridge for Indigenous Reconciliation in Vancouver, British Columbia. Same thing. I think that's because of this awakening on equity and inclusion. So I think it was very ripe, I think. But that's been a wildly popular case study over the last several months. If you look for longer trends on stormwater and green infrastructure, there's a very, very popular case study from Camden County MUA. CCMUA. This is Andy Kreiken's work, if you're familiar with him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's a very...
everybody loves Andy. He's a great water leader.
So Andy is also on our city advisory team. Andy is wonderful. Like, absolutely wonderful. The backstory with me and Andy is that he was actually, we did some work with him on that Rockefeller grant.
Okay.
So we go way back with Andy. He's great. But so there's a case study out of CCMUA, you're probably familiar, but they had a series of very successful green infrastructure installations where they used them as an anchor for local workforce development and training. So it actually created some really highly skilled jobs, and people got tech training and all that kind of stuff. So again, I think that there's a reason for that, right? Which is that I think there's this other whole national conversation about workforce development and training and skilled work and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's been a really popular one too. And then the last one was sea level rise. And the most popular one, this is all time, but the most popular one in sea level rise is a project out of Mobile, Alabama, where they did oyster shell. They did an oyster shell seawall that was really successful and was actually at a pretty large scale. So this is the atlas. This is the homepage. You can see there's some featured case studies, all that kind of good stuff. Remember, all this is free. I know I said that at the beginning, but I wanted to say that again. totally free for local government and nonprofits. I'm going to click on case studies and show you the case study database real quick so that you can get a handle on some of the good, juicy water stuff that's in here. So this is the case study database. These are some of those case studies I was just referencing. I'm going to select some flooding tags and some, I don't know, let's do water supply and drought and maybe water quality. How about that?
Those are good ones.
Those are good ones. Those are relevant, hopefully. So as you start to scroll through here, you'll start to see case studies. So Superfund sites, historical data, all kinds of stuff. So, this is that oyster reef project I was just referencing in Mobile, Alabama. Do you want me to click on?
Sure.
Click on
Let's go in one and see what it looks like.
Okay, let's do Mr. Trash Wheel.
I love that guy.
Okay, let's look at Mr. Trash Wheel.
He's everybody's favorite trash picker upper. I mean, really.
Yeah, I mean he is. So as you start to scroll through here, you'll see all of the kind of important summary details about this, right? How much it cost, when it was built, pictures, keywords, more reading, all of that kind of good stuff. Very importantly, all of these case studies are designed to be basically skimmable. So at a glance, what was the problem that was addressed? What was the solution that was used? And what were the actual outcomes? So in this case, Mr. Trash Wheel has prevented 3.5 million pounds of trash from reaching Baltimore Harbor. That's pretty great. All the way down to comments and all that kind of stuff. If we have it, we will even display the RFP that was used to actually build the project, because we know people like to copy and paste scopes of work.
And then it makes it very shareable. You can share that or favorite it and keep it for later, kind of thing. And
yep, absolutely. I'm going to just keep scrolling through here for a second.
Well, look, you've even got one from Italy there. I saw Venice.
Oh yeah.
So you do get some international submissions.
Yeah, we do. This is Venice, flooding and high tides. I'm going to just scroll through here again, and then we can go back to talking. See, here are some data ones. 7,000 continuous water quality data points. Backflow testing. Here's a real, we'll look at a more technical one. So this is water reclamation in the city of Los Angeles. Oh, see, and here we have the RFP here. This is a huge project, 140 million. Same thing, if we have the ongoing maintenance costs, we'll display that as well. And you can see it still follows that same template, right? Most importantly, I think, are the outcomes, personally.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to use this adjective in regard to this particular case study, but it makes it very digestible, right? It's not too extensive. It's very, very organized and short, but gives you the key info, so you can kind of learn and then act if you want to.
Well, yeah, and this is what I was going to say is, right, some of this was selfish, right, in that I was finding myself spending an enormous amount of time skimming through white papers and a million different websites trying to find these, and everything is written in different formats. Some of them are 40 pages long, and it's impossible to figure out whether or not something is actually relevant, in a 1 minute kind of fashion. So our goal was to design these in a way that you could figure out very quickly just by scrolling the summaries what's relevant to you and what's not relevant to you. So this is a Spanish-speaking resident engagement with lead pipe replacement. I think this is actually a private sector case study, so that's a good example to give too.
In 120 water, yep.
Yeah, so 120 Water Audit is one of our private sector partners. And they uploaded this case study, they published this case study, and you'll always see the company contact on anything that's private sector. So it's very obvious which ones have been published by them.
I guess my last question is what's next? What are you looking to do with the Atlas? What's kind of upcoming? Maybe whether it's functionality or content or whatever. I know that nothing's ever static, right? You're always looking to improve and do new things and do more. So, what's on your plate?
Always. So we're going to be improving and iterating on all of the features and functionality that we already have. So making the case study database bigger, better, more awesome, all of that kind of stuff. Making the following topics functionality bigger, better, all of those good things. So we're going to for sure iterate and continue to improve the core features and the core functionality, because we're like not 2 years old.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the name of the game, right? That's our main thing. What I would say in terms of new features and new functionality is that we are going to be introducing lots of other types of resources outside of just case studies. So we've started doing things like changemaker interviews. So interviewing top local government leaders, right? About the work that they're doing on the ground, and some of the more intangible lessons learned and kind of keys to success that are very, very difficult to capture just in a case study, right? So you can imagine it as kind of supplemental to the actual case studies themselves, but it's more of those intangibles to hear from local leaders themselves. We've started doing a couple of these, and we'll continue to do more of them. And we'll, I think, continue to expand into other different types of resources. So like we did a huge COVID survey of, I think it was like more than 600 local government officials and staff took the survey about all of the various impacts of COVID on local government operations and capital planning. We did that last spring. We'll continue to do more of that as we move forward and find better homes for them in the site itself. Right now, they're kind of siphoned off into some separate areas. So we're gonna find ways to bring that out more to the forefront, because that work is really important and really, really impactful.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Ellory, it was great catching up with you for this podcast. It's been overdue from my end. I've meant to reach out for a while. The Atlas is awesome. So congrats on all the success, and best of luck continuing to evolve it and making it impactful. And thanks for coming on to chat.
Well, likewise. And I would say ditto on Waterloop.
Yeah,
We've been big fans. We've been big fans for a long time, even when the Atlas was just a wee bitty Google spreadsheet.
and now you're like a powerful toddler at 2 years old,
Exactly. At 2 years old. Ooh, that's a scary analogy, because I have a 2-year-old.
Yes. Small but powerful. Ellory, awesome. Yes. Take care.
Thanks for everything.
Waterloop.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. A special thanks to Waterloop supporters, Spring Point Partners, and the Walton Family Foundation. Waterloop is sponsored by High Sierra Showerheads, the smart, stylish choice for conserving water, energy, and money while enjoying an invigorating shower. Use promo code LOOP20 for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com. Waterloop is also sponsored by Hydroloop, the innovative water recycling system for homes and businesses. Use water twice with Hydroloop. Learn more at hydroloop.com. If you like Waterloop, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media and visit waterloop.org to sign up for updates.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.